Touching, when done right, feels good and is conducive for flirting and connecting. Don't randomly start grabbing their out of context or whipping your out, and you're not gonna have any issues. What up, Casanova, and welcome to my three-part series on how to touch or be physically intimate with women in social settings. Now, in this first part, we're gonna be looking at the 5 principles that you need to follow or keep in mind in order to navigate this area with greater ease and optimize your interactions with girls. And in the next couple of videos, we're gonna be looking at all the different ways in which you can touch or initiate physical intimacy with women in social settings, and looking at a bunch of different examples within each category. Now, before we get into it, if you have not yet subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you can be notified when we release new videos in the future. Let's first define physical intimacy. Well, it's essentially sensual proximity or touching, or the combination of the two. It's a way of expressing yourself and your feelings towards other people, whether they're casual or friendly or romantic/sexual. Now, this area is especially confusing for guys when they're out in social situations during the day or bars or clubs, when they're meeting women, or when they're meeting up with a girl for the first time on a date, first couple of dates. Navigating that area, especially in light of the events that have taken place in the last few years, has become a very murky and scary place. So I want to shed light on this matter. This is very important because physical intimacy, or haptic communication as it's also called, essentially touch-based communication from the Greek word, is a very powerful form of nonverbal communication. It's a great way to convey your underlying intent in an interaction. So essentially, it's a great way of flirting, connecting, and establishing comfort with women, and men too, in a non-romantic sense. Now, as the touching contributes to building sexual tension in the interaction between you and the girl, and as it becomes increasingly more intimate, it slowly also makes women aroused. And arousal leads to sex. Moreover, it also sends an honest signal about certain masculine qualities that you possess or a lack thereof. Qualities such as confidence, dominance, assertiveness, independence, leadership, social acuity, etc., etc. In some studies that were conducted, men who were seen as touching others, both women and men in social situations, were perceived to have higher social status or social power than those who were not touching others. And let me tell you, from my extensive personal experience, nothing can be further from the truth. Another interesting fact is that men generally are known and expected to initiate touch more in the early stages of a courtship or of a relationship, whereas women start to touch more in the more serious stages of a relationship or in the courtship phases as they get more comfortable. Now, the big question stands. Well, how do you get good at touching women or initiating physical intimacy in social situations in a way that's comfortable, that doesn't creep girls out, but instead leaves them enjoying it and wanting more and connecting with you? Well, the first principle that you have to keep in mind is that you have to give yourself permission to touch. Not just women, men, people in general. You have to give yourself that permission. Now, this is a bit of a tricky and nuanced concept because with everything that's gone down in the last few years with the Me Too movement, with all these women coming out and saying they've been sexually harassed or abused, etc., with men overstepping their boundaries and abusing power, this has become a very delicate and a bit of a scary or risque topic because a lot of men are terrified of overstepping those boundaries, creeping girls out, getting their ass Me Too'd. And the word permission inherently almost plays into this negative narrative that we've been hearing where it's like, the patriarchy and toxic masculinity, and if you're giving yourself permission to touch women, well, that just sends the wrong message. That just means that you're not considerate of women's comfort, etc., which could not be further from the truth. Because again, touching, when done right, feels good and is conducive for flirting and connecting with women and men. And most of all, it conveys that you are a socially attuned and confident man, which is, guess what women want, and the kind of guys that men like to be around as well.
Yo, quick announcement, my dude. Just want to briefly mention that over the last year, many guys have been asking me, how do you create chemistry with women? And this has sadly been exaggerated by the pandemic. That's right, I'm talking about that magic you see me create with the girls in my videos. So, I've decided to give away a super entertaining, uncut, infield bonus video showing exactly that. Just click on the link in the description below. By signing up, you're also joining the VIP list for our, wait for it, new course, Honest Chemistry, which will be released in the near future and will teach you everything to do with creating chemistry, from sexual tension to an amazing connection. This course has been more than a year in the making, and I'm really excited to release it. So be sure to click on the link in the description box or comment section below to get access to your bonus video and stay in the loop. All right, now let's get back into it.
Now, what happens is the more confident you become and the better you get at reading women in social situations, the more permission that you'll be able to give yourself to touch in increasingly intimate ways. Similarly, the more positive reference experiences that you gain with touching women, the more confidence that you'll gain in the process and in social situations in general. So surprise, surprise, with more experience, you're gonna feel a lot more comfortable and confident navigating the space. But you gotta start somewhere if your experience is limited. And you're in luck because I have some more principles for you to follow which can help you avoid tricky situations. Which leads us into the second principle to keep in mind, and that is that your confidence or your comfort and the ease with which you carry yourself and with which you, most importantly, initiate the physical intimacy really matters. So when you are initiating touch, what women are, subconsciously gauging is how fluid is your movement? Is it flowing or is it like choppy and awkward and lacking certainty and conviction? Because that's where it starts getting really creepy. Secondly, they look at how comfortably felt is your touch, meaning you don't want your touch to be too light or too limp, because that signals that you are weak, dishonest, creepy, okay? So you don't want to be aggressive, okay? But you don't want to be hovering very lightly, okay? You want to just be comfortable. Make sure that it's comfortably felt. So this is very key. The next point is the frame you set in the interaction, or the vibe that you convey in your interaction from the very beginning is also very important and reflects on how your touch is perceived in the interaction. Meaning, if you set the frame of, I'm a cool, confident guy, I'm fun, I'm flirtatious from the very beginning, if you start touching the girl sooner rather than later, and if you're also touching, people in her group, or people around, if she just notices you generally being a naturally more physical guy with other people, well then when you touch her, it's a lot more congruent. There's a certain continuity there. It's not as weird because it's in line with your character. It's in line with this frame that you've set to the dynamic. And I can't stress the importance of this enough. Alternatively, if you set the frame of this really nice, sweet, quiet, friendly guy who's just not touching anyone, who's just afraid and meek, and maybe he's got some kind of a hidden agenda, then of course, any initiation of touch, especially if it's very delayed, is going to be unwelcome. It's going to come out of the blue. It's going to be creepy and weird. And hey, if you're struggling to set a cool, confident, flirtatious frame in the interaction, to convey that vibe, then you got to practice this stuff. You got to watch my other videos. You got to slowly implement these principles that I teach so that you can generally be more attractive in the interactions. And sure, there is going to be some element of fake it till you make it, but just remember, how your touch is perceived goes hand in hand with how you're generally perceived. Principle 4 is gauge the situation and then choose the level of touch or physical intimacy that is appropriate for it. So you want to be looking at things like, first of all, where are you meeting this woman? Is it in a low stimulus environment or a high stimulus environment? So is it like on the street or at the park or in a bookstore, or is it at a lounge, a bar, a club? Then you want to look at the more narrow context in which you're in. So things like, okay, well, who is she here with? Is she here with people from work? Is it some kind of a happy hour spot where she might be surrounded with people from work or people from her industry between 5 and 8 p.m.? Or is it the dance floor of a nightclub? Or is she seated and having dinner with a few girlfriends in the restaurant area of the lounge? Is she alone? Is she with friends? What is the dynamic between her and her friends? What is the stage of the interaction that you're in with this girl? What point of the interaction are you looking at? Like, what specifically is happening in any given moment? Because how you respond with your physical expressiveness matters. Then you look at things like her general emotional and physical arousal level. And typically, when you're in higher stimulus environments, her general arousal levels are going to be higher than in lower stimulus environments. Of course, if she's in a bookstore and if she's in a bar, completely different. And typically when girls are in higher levels of arousal, they're going to be a lot more receptive to more physically intimate touching. Moreover, you want to be looking at her general interest towards you or her attraction level, as well as how comfortable she feels in the space, how comfortable she feels with you, or how much time she spent around you. So based on all of that, you're going to be gauging the way in which you're going to be touching her. The intensity, the duration, where you're touching her, how often, etc., etc. Now, a lot of this can seem a bit overwhelming if you're not yet very socially calibrated. And believe me, I too was there once. So as a general principle, if you're not yet super comfortable in navigating this area, you want to err on the side of caution. Okay, so start small and slowly, gradually increase the levels of assumed intimacy as you get more positive feedback or as you can better gauge the situation. And in the next couple of videos, I'll be giving you a bunch of different examples and showing you all the different ways in which you can initiate touch, ranging from lower risk to higher risk, or lower intimacy to higher intimacy. And you especially want to be more cautious when it comes to areas that you frequent or where there are higher social repercussions. So your workplace, where you go to school, perhaps your local gym, your local coffee shop that you frequent, where if you fuck up, you're gonna get a bad rep or you can get fired, So this is not the place where you want to be, experimenting too much. So play it safe. With that being said, we come to the last principle, principle 5, which is attempt and adjust. So remember, while you're erring on the side of caution, you also slowly want to be building that muscle and getting more comfortable in initiating touch. And a big part of this is giving yourself a certain level of permission. So basically, try stuff and always know that you might have to correct. So basically, at all times, you're going to be looking at things like, is she comfortable? You're going to be trying to read her body language, her indirect and direct communication. Women generally communicate in a more indirect fashion, so you have to become better at reading their cues. So if she's uncomfortable with some of your touch, she will communicate it to you in how she responds. And sometimes if you've really crossed the line, or if the girl is more assertive in her communication, she will let you know and say, hey, you know, you're touching me too much, or hey, that's too much. And usually that's if you've really crossed the line. So if you ever overstep your boundaries a bit, just dial back, okay? Take some space. Apologize if necessary. Address it. You can even say stuff like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just really physically expressive, or in my culture, we're very physical, I'm Mediterranean, or I'm South American, whatever it is, I'm Russian. And remember that every girl is different. Some girls are more receptive to touch, some are less receptive to touch. Also, the girl's headspace, the headspace that she's in at any given moment, plays a big role in how she's interpreting your touch or your advances, or how social she's feeling, how willing she is to connect or flirt, and similarly, how she's interpreting the social situation that she's in at any given point, or the interaction that she's in with you can change. So for example, she might be, let's say, initially annoyed with you, but then you do something and you win her over, and suddenly her whole perception of you changes. So of course she's gonna be a lot more receptive to touch then. And most importantly, don't get discouraged if you miscalibrate a bit, because guess what? Girls can be very forgiving within reason and generally look at the whole picture. They look at the interaction and your vibe in its entirety. I've had plenty of situations where I miscalibrated a bit and girls would kind of communicate it to me. Sometimes they would even communicate it directly, you know, where you think, oh fuck, like I really crossed the line here. Not necessarily. Sometimes something that works for 95% of girls, some kind of touch that you initiate early on that's lower risk. With some girls, they could just be uncomfortable in general or in that moment, and they might just let you know, and you know, you take the feedback, you apologize, you say, hey, you know, sorry, or in my culture, blah, blah, blah. But oftentimes that doesn't mean that the interaction has been sabotaged. So don't get discouraged, take the feedback, dial it back, adjust accordingly, and just move forward. And most of the time, you know, if you err on the side of caution and just gradually increase the levels of intimacy as you become a better gauge of these social situations, you're gonna be fine. You know, don't randomly start grabbing their asses out of context or whipping your dick out, and you're not gonna have any issues. And now the question is, well, how do you practice this? Well, by fucking just practicing it. And the best place to practice this is bars, clubs, higher stimulus environments where the social repercussions are not as high, where your level of anonymity is also higher. That doesn't mean that you should be trying to get away with some like very inappropriate thing because you're more anonymous in a bar. No. It's just that if you put your hand on a girl's shoulder for a few seconds more at a bar, that's not gonna carry the same social repercussions as if you do it to the girl you work next to or the barista that you get your coffee from, let alone if you put your hand on her thigh. Okay, so you can go out there and practice and touch men too. Okay, not in some weird romantic sense, but in a very casual way that people touch when they're in social interactions. Learn to become more comfortable with touching people in general. So follow these principles that I've laid out for you as you practice this and learn to become more comfortable with this, and you'll be fine, especially once you see all the different examples I'm going to be showing you in the next couple of videos. You'll have a very well-rounded perspective on the topic, and you can become a confident physical guy in no time. All right, guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and comment below, as well as tune in later this week for part 2 of the series, where I'll be discussing 3 low-risk ways in which you can touch women when you're out. And don't forget to sign up for the Honest Chemistry VIP list so that you can get your free uncut infield bonus video, link in the description below or in the comments section. Thanks again, and until next time.